The party opposite talked down the economy. They crippled businesses with colossal taxes, breaking all their promises. This is a crisis made in Downing Street.
The British economy is at a breaking point thanks to Rachel Reeves's idiotic blunders.
Rachel Reeves will announce that she's going further and faster in the name of growth. And it's little surprise that she needs to say this. Growth has been sclerotic. Indeed, all the economic indicators have been flashing red for the Chancellor for quite some time.
Terrified Rachel is getting desperate as the economy is flatlining and her career is in danger.
This whole sorry tale is nothing short of a Shakespearean tragedy, playing out before our eyes. This is the Hamlet of our time. They promised the electorate much while pouring the poison into their ear.
In a shameful and disgusting move, Rachel Reeves and Labour's cronies have the audacity to laugh while the country is suffering.
It is good to see the Chancellor in her place and to thank her for advance sight of her statement. Mr. Speaker, I know that the Chancellor has been away, so let me update her on the mess that she left behind. The pound has hit a 14-month low. Government borrowing costs are at a 27-year high. Growth has been killed stone dead.
While the incompetent Rachel Reeves has been running around like a coward, the UK's economy is up in flames.
The party opposite talked down the economy. They crippled businesses with colossal taxes, breaking all their promises. This is a crisis made in Downing Street. And Mr. Speaker, it should hardly surprise the Chancellor that international markets are uneasy. The UK's long-term borrowing costs have risen to their highest in almost 30 years.
Labour and their useless cronies created this mess, and now they're in crisis mode, trying to fix it.
Where was the Chancellor? Her trip to China had not even begun when my urgent question was taken in the House last week. She was still in the country, but she sent the Chief Secretary rather than face up to her own failures. So can I ask the Right Honourable Lady why she chose not to respond herself?
In reality, Rachel Reeves is trying to avoid accountability and weasel her way out of the disaster she's responsible for.
The Chancellor, of course, ducked the difficult questions by jetting off to Beijing. I believe that in Labour circles they are calling it the Peking duck, Mr. Speaker. Well, whatever was on the menu in China, was it really worth the unedifying sight of an increasingly desperate politician scampering halfway around the world with a begging bowl?
This is the peak of Starmerism, as they all run away from difficult questions because they have no answers.
Pales in comparison to Labour's black hole, which has opened up in the public finances while the Right Honourable Lady was absent from her station. To give a sense of scale, Mr. Speaker, the deal the Chancellor has announced amounts to £120 million per year. The rise in our borrowing costs due to her disastrous budget has added around £12 billion to our annual spending on debt interest alone.
Despite all that whining about a supposed black hole in the public finances, Rachel Reeves is the one creating it now.
That is money that cannot now go on the public's priorities. £12 billion is enough to pay for 300,000 nurses, to cover Labour's pernicious winter fuel payments cut for 8.5 years. And of course, even before this latest market reaction, the budget meant spending tens of billions more in servicing our debt.
Rachel Reeves has shamelessly betrayed the vulnerable Brits in the most disgusting way possible.
And we on this side know how this sorry story goes. We have seen it, Mr. Speaker. We have seen it all before. Socialist governments Socialist governments that think they can tax and spend their way to prosperity.
The entire Labour Party shows just how disgraceful and pathetic they are by laughing like they don't care.
This whole sorry tale is nothing short of a Shakespearean tragedy, playing out before our eyes. This is the Hamlet of our time. They promise the electorate much while pouring the poison into their ear. At the end, you can feel the end.
Even Rachel Reeves laughs while the economy is quite literally at a breaking point. Things have gotten so much worse in just 6 months that people are fearing a recession. This shambolic government with their idiotic policies and Rachel Reeves' nightmare budget has completely brought the UK to its knees, and we're paying the consequences of their actions. Meanwhile, Starmer and his cronies fly around the world without the slightest care about the British public that they're leeching dry with their endless tax raids. Of course, all that money doesn't go anywhere good either. Rachel Reeves ends up throwing it away on the most useless plans possible.
You've made it clear, haven't you, that economic growth is the #1 mission of your government. But the most recent official data shows there's virtually no growth in GDP. And in your announcement yesterday, not one of those announcements was new, and not one of them actually provides immediate growth. We'll see growth in 20, 30 years, but no answers for now. It's not solving.
Now that the entire nation is fuming and demanding Rachel Reeves' resignation, she's trying to backtrack and do some damage control. Unfortunately for her, it's too little too late, and her recent plans for growth are just as useless as her. This entire government is so incredibly tone deaf that they don't listen to what the British public is demanding, and that's simply because of their inflated egos and insecurities. These recent plans are long-term band-aids that won't show results for years to come. Meanwhile, our economy is plummeting, and unless we do something about it, there won't be any economy left to grow.
Well, the most recent numbers did show the economy growing, but that growth is not strong enough. I want to go further and faster in delivering it. A business survey that came out straight after my speech yesterday suggested that 2/3 of business, because of what I announced, now feel more confident about our country's growth prospects.
She completely ignored the original question and gave an utterly pointless and irrelevant reply. Instead of being honest with the people and showing some transparency for once, Rachel Reeves decided to double down on her lies and attempts to gaslight the public. She keeps whining about how Labour is dedicated to bringing growth, but when asked about their immediate plans to stabilise the mess that she has created, she's speechless. It's become abundantly clear that Rachel Reeves is way out of her depth, but then again, what else did we expect from a Chancellor that lies on her CV?
Well, and that sounds great, except that 1 in 4 businesses have cut jobs since your budget. Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Tesco, Asda, BP have announced thousands of job losses and blaming your policies for it.
Well, businesses have to make their own decisions about the number of staff they need to serve their customers.
All of her delusional fairy tales that she's trying to sell to the public sound great on paper, but the reality is she has no real plan on how to achieve any of that. Just look at the dozens of blunders she has made and how badly it has ruined our economy. Businesses are struggling to stay afloat, and while many are leaving the country or shutting down, others are laying off workers. That's right, not even our jobs are secure anymore under this disastrous Chancellor.
By the summer, we want to sign off a development consent order in this Parliament so we can get cracking and see those planes take off.
But talk in the papers today is saying that Heathrow won't be ready until 2050. So what happens in the immediate term, in the next few months? Because if the economy continues to underperform and you don't meet your fiscal rules, can you rule out emergency tax measures after March the 26th, which is when the OBR sets out its economic forecast?
The entire nation is screaming for help, but Rachel Reeves and Starmer are too busy with distant plans like a third runway. Ask yourself, how does a third runway help bring down your cost of living in the immediate to short term? None of this contributes to the growth that Labour promised, and at this point, nobody believes them anymore. It has become routine for Starmer and his cronies to make grand promises and then shamelessly betray them.
Well, we made tax changes in the budget. The Office of Budget Responsibility will give their forecast on March the 26th. That's in 2 months' time, and I will set out our plans then. But in the budget in October, we did what was necessary to draw a line under the economic and fiscal mismanagement of the previous government, a £22 billion black hole that I inherited.
The sheer horror on Rachel Reeves' face when she realizes that she can't run from that question is concerning. Throughout that whole lot of nothing nonsense answer, she did not deny the chances of more taxes. You know what that means. Get ready for more tax raids by this idiot Chancellor who thinks she can tax her way out of everything. At this rate, this government is resolute on leeching us dry and robbing us of all our money. All the while, the quality of life and cost of living in this country keeps on increasing.
But the problem isn't it, that all of these things are going to take many, many, many years, first of all, to get them up and running, and then to deliver that growth that is the government's #1 mission. Now, we need growth now, and none of this, as far as I can see, is going to deliver.
The biggest reason that the Labour Party got elected was because they promised to bring higher growth. Starmer put that in his manifesto and made multiple pledges throughout the elections. Now, we've seen that the manifesto was nothing more than a horrible joke that nobody is laughing at. Rachel Reeves has killed growth stone dead in our country, and things are likely to keep getting worse, especially since our economy is at a breaking point, and so far, Rachel Reeves is neither capable nor willing to do anything about it, judging by her dreadful speech.
Rachel Reeves is under fire once again. The Chancellor stood up today in what has been dubbed a dull speech. She bragged of her economic prowess and her strategy for growth, even as the economic indicators turn red. And the opposition have already been calling for her to resign.
Before we came into office, the Prime Minister and I have said loud and clear, economic growth is the #1 mission of this government.
There's not an ounce of optimism in this government, and the public has lost all trust in them, and for good reason. All Rachel Reeves is good at doing is lying through her teeth and making a fool out of the public for ever trusting her. She keeps on bragging about growth and how it's their #1 mission, but we've seen anything but growth in our economy. No matter who you ask, every economist with a shred of common sense is calling Rachel Reeves a bumbling idiot who has no idea what she's doing.
To go or not to go, that is now a question. The Prime Minister will be damned if he does, but he will surely be damned if he does not.
But Reeves vowed she would fight to bring growth to the UK.
Low growth is not our destiny. But growth will not come without a fight. Without a government willing to take the right decisions now to change our country's future for the better.
The Tories are shredding Labour apart over this economic disaster, and the British public is no different. There's a furious backlash coming for Rachel Reeves as the Brits are fed up with being clobbered by endless taxes. And where does all that taxpayer money go? Down the drain, as Starmer spends most of it on giving luxury treatment to illegal immigrants or funding foreign countries that do not help us out in any way whatsoever. The public is this government's last priority, so it's no wonder that people are demanding a resignation from Rachel.
Things have gotten so bad, the UK is hemorrhaging millionaires.
We're now about 10,000 millionaires that have left since lockdown. UBS predict it's going to be 500,000, which is 1/6 of all millionaires in the UK. And the budget really hurt entrepreneurs and business owners. She's never run a business, and the economy is a business. Seems very out of touch with what it takes to grow an economy.
Labour's sinister socialist agenda is behind all of this. They hate the wealthy, and that is why they've made Britain completely unlivable for them. Of course, the millionaires can just choose to leave the country, and that leaves us, the working class Brits, to deal with the consequences of this ridiculous nonsense. Small businesses are shutting down, prices are increasing, and unemployment is creeping up. The reason is simple: nobody in the Labour Party knows anything about how to run a business. In fact, Rachel Reeves can't even do her own taxes yet. We've somehow put her in charge of the entire economy.
Economic stability is the precondition for economic growth. That's why the first piece of legislation that we passed as a government was the Budget Responsibility Act, so that never again can we see our independent forecasters sidelined, and never again will we see a repeat of the Liz Truss mini-budget, which sent borrowing costs and mortgage rates spiralling for families?
Yet the Chancellor did just that with her budget, as borrowing costs soared.
All Starmer and his cronies, especially Rachel Reeves and Angela Rayner, do is bash the previous governments. What's pathetic about all this is that they're the biggest hypocrites in British politics at the moment. Rachel Reeves has the audacity to say all that while she has taken the same, if not worse, measures. Labour's government is out of touch with reality. They talk as if nothing's wrong while the economy is beginning to crack and markets are bracing for a crash.
Look at some of the latest economic data. It doesn't make for great reading for the Treasury or indeed the government. Lower manufacturing production, got new work falling at the fastest pace since October 2023. Prices have increased at the fastest level for 18 months in January. Employment has fallen for 4 months. This is all since the budget, so it can't really be blamed on 14 years of Tory rule. It's not a great indictment, is it, of the way that Labour is running the economy?
Rachel Reeves loves to lie, but the stats tell the truth. Despite Labour's recent positive attitude, it's a little too late as virtually every metric shows just how abysmal of a job they're doing. The economy is in shambles and we've nobody to blame except Rachel Reeves and Starmer. The current state of Britain is as depressing as it gets and Labour has only managed to make things worse in just 6 months. The worst part is, they know exactly what's happening but are either in denial or straight up lying to the public.
What will happen if we go into recession, James Murray?
Well, we don't want that to happen. We want economic growth to be boosted. And
Could it happen though?
What we want to do as a government is make sure economic growth is as strong as possible,
I know
and that's
you
why
do,
we're doing all these changes.
Could you actually go into recession? You've promised all of this growth. The figures look dire. What happens if we go into recession? Would Rachel Reeves then have to consider her position?
Any responsible government would have a backup plan ready by now. There's a very real possibility that we might go into recession, and Rachel Reeves is doing nothing about it. They've trained every Labour minister to just deny it. All we keep hearing are pre-prepared generic answers that inspire little to no confidence. Is it any wonder that businesses are terrified of what's to come and investors are leaving the country? The truth about the economy is out, and it's much worse than you could ever imagine.
The economy. It's not going well, is it? No, the United Kingdom has had its growth expectations downgraded from what the ONS decided it would be last year. No longer are we growing at 2%. International forecasts say we're going to be bumbling on at closer to 1.5% growth. Now, when you take into account population growth, we're looking at per capita decline in our economy.
There's a steady decline in our economy's progress, and every institution is warning us to brace for a potential disaster. Of course, Reeves and Starmer will still laugh about it and tell that everything is going all right. Even Labour's own ministers are starting to despise this hellish duo, and for good reason. Starmer and his cronies have no spine and have gone against every single Labour principle.
Clear that the UK has been bumbling along with negligible growth for quite some time. And by many metrics, things got a little bit worse over the last 6 months this government has been in office. Business confidence down, consumer confidence down, employment down. So it's no wonder that this week we're expecting a reset from the Chancellor. Although she won't call it a relaunch, a reset, or even a rebranding. No, she says this was the plan all along.
Quite literally, nobody has confidence in this shambolic government anymore. Mind you, things weren't this bad during a global pandemic. That means the Labour virus has been worse for this country than anything we've seen in recent years, and that just goes to show how big of a nightmare Rachel Reeves has been for Britain. The nerve Rachel Reeves has to claim that everything is going according to her plan. Was ruining the economy her plan all along?
This week, Rachel Reeves will announce that she's going further and faster in the name of growth. And it's little surprise that she needs to say this. Growth has been sclerotic. Indeed, all the economic indicators have been flashing red for the Chancellor for quite some time.
Rachel Reeves is terrified of the raging British public, and she's running around in a panic, trying to squeeze out growth from any possible corner. What Starmer and Rachel Reeves need right now is a miracle, because things are looking impossible to turn around the way immigration is out of control too. Of course, that doesn't stop these buffoons from being delusional.
Extraordinary figure for a Chancellor who says she wants to fill in a black hole left by the previous government. Well, instead, it looks like by any metric those black holes got bigger. So of course the Chancellor needs to look for growth. This week she's been meeting with CEOs of some of the largest companies in the UK, asking their thoughts on how to get things growing again, on how to fix the mess of the UK economy.
Remember the black hole excuse Starmer and Rachel Reeves loved to throw around when they got into office? Well, that's been debunked, and to nobody's surprise, they lied about it as well. The irony here is that Rachel Reeves is the one creating a black hole worth billions with her insane policies that are increasing the national debt at a staggering rate. The Tories were right. Labour is fiddling the figures.
Part of this, of course, has been the way in which the Chancellor herself has been speaking for the last 6 months, ever since the election. It was dour doom and gloom. Things were ever so much worse than she was expecting. The state of the UK economy was in the dumps, and in many ways, the Chancellor spoke down the UK economy.
It's not just their disgusting policies that have led to this mess, it's their overall behaviour as well. One of the very first speeches Starmer gave, he was crying about how things will get much worse. Even Rachel Reeves was repeating the same depressing sob story. Is it any wonder then that people don't want to invest in a country whose leaders are incompetent and gloomy at the same time?
It's a sorry situation, but there could be worse coming. Far from the indication that the Chancellor wants to cut red tape, 150 pages of red tape could be about to descend upon businesses in what the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, are describing as a generational contract for workers' rights. But where many employers hear the words workers' rights, they see on paper it turns out to be more red tape for businesses and potentially just stronger rights for unions, less individual rights for individual employees.
Starmer was right about one thing. Things will get much worse from here onwards. The situation is appalling enough as it is, but that doesn't stop Labour from pushing their disgusting agenda at our expense. No, they're not going to fix the economy or do anything about the insane illegal immigration rates. What they'll do is try to turn this country into a delusional socialist fantasy land. Luckily, the Brits have had enough and are demanding Rachel Reeves' resignation. Now, that's something you can show your support for by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.